much more than that. The wind will be the greatest point of interest for the riders when they were looking at the forecast last night and this morning. Wind averaging around about 20 to 30 kilometres per hour, with gusts up to 55 kilometres per hour towards the back end of the stage. We're inside the final minute before the race rolls away. The neutral zone before racing gets underway proper in almost 30 minutes' time. The world champion Peter Sagan at the front, along with three of the locals at the front of the race. Three riders coming from the region, getting the chance to go right to the very front of the peloton before they roll away. Adam Hansen also at the front, starting and aiming to finish his 15th Grand Tour in a row. Alberto Contador looking relaxed, but probably a little pensive as well. They roll away for the start of the 103rd edition of the Tour de France, but there's some formalities to get at 12:50 local time, which is just on 29 minutes away. A chance to adore the magnificent Mont Saint-Michel. Dates back to 966. Extraordinary history, and we'll get an opportunity later on to take a closer look at it. 198 riders in the race across 22 teams, 9 riders per team, and there's been a few jersey changes to pick up throughout the race. As we look at Nairo Quintana, the second place finisher in his only 2 appearances at the Tour, 2013 and 15. He's ridden the race twice. His worst result is second. As he speaks with Alberto Contador, a man who has won this race twice, 2007 and 2009, but the last time Contador won a stage of the Tour de France was indeed back in 2009, 7 years ago. It seems like such a long time for Alberto Contador, given all the other success that he's had in the meantime. A calm Nairo Quintana, but the one thing that will provide him with a little bit of concern, no doubt, will be the crosswinds towards the back end of today's stage. In fact, throughout the majority of today's stage, to be perfectly fair, as they go all the way up along the coast, they're expected to be hit by winds from left to right. The Cannondale team, now known as Cannondale Drapac, you can see that little bit of red that adorns the jersey of the American team. It's now a part Australian team. Michael Drapac, who has been supporting cycling in Australia since around about 2003, has made the step up. He's joined forces with Slipstream Sport, the group headed up by Jonathan Vaughters, and is now a part sponsor of that squad. And the Abbey of Mont Saint-Michel, a chance to take a look at it from above. Contador won't be doing any touristic visits today, nor will he have done so throughout the past few days. It's business time for Alberto Contador. Michael Chirel is the rider that's alongside him from AG2R Le Mondial. Italian being the second language of Peter Sagan, English third. And it was his first appearance of the Tour de France 5 years ago that really inspired Peter Sagan to work on his English because of, understandably, the amount of attention that he received. He won 3 stages in his debut at the Tour and won the green jersey. Thomas de Gendt in the red colours for Lotto Soudal, a former 3rd place finisher at the Giro d'Italia. But his role at this year's Tour de France, it won't be aiming for the general classification. His role here will be aiming to get the yellow jersey for the Lotto Soudal squad today. Stage 1, Andre Greipel, their big sprinter, one of the key favourites to collect the honours this afternoon. In fact, it's an incredibly strong team built around Andre Greipel. Effectively, the whole squad is supporting the German sprinter, and perhaps it's only really Tony Galopin, the Frenchman, with some freedom to go elsewhere. The pre-race favourite, Chris Froome. Trying to eavesdrop on the conversation between Adam Hansen and Chris Froome. They look very calm. The tide here is quite a dramatic tide. It goes out 10 kilometres and comes back in. It moves relatively quickly. They've got to get the timing right to be able to have the stage go to the foot of Mont Saint-Michel. And the bridge that you can see that's been built there, it took some 10 years to construct, and it was just being finished at the time the Tour de France came here back in 2013, when it was an individual time trial that was won by the triple world champion Tony Martin. Just 44 people live on this little island. What a stunning place to live. Fortified walls that enclosed the village back in the 14th and the 15th century. The English attempted to capture it throughout the 100 Years' Wars, but their relentless attacks, invasions, were unsuccessful. I'm not sure if you can overhear some of the riders, but I can actually hear them, and they're not too complimentary of how this has been organised. Didn't think it was the best of ideas to bring the vehicles down here, as it's going to be very difficult for them to make the U-turn and get behind the peloton. Some relaxed, experienced-looking riders, and some a little pensive. 33 first-timers in this year's tour, and one of them is a genuine contender for a top 10 or even a top 5 finish, Fabio Aru, the team leader for the Astana squad. And he's got some good support with Vincenzo Nibali, who won this race in 2014 and is fresh off having won the Giro d'Italia. Not that I'm sure fresh is the right word. Maybe he's fatigued off winning the Giro d'Italia. Time will tell how he's been able to recover. We've certainly seen the evidence last year of Alberto Contador, who won the Giro d'Italia just ahead of Fabio Aru, came to the Tour with high ambitions of trying to do the double. But the effects of 2 Grand Tours in one season caught up with him, and he ended up finishing in 5th position here last year. Towards the front for Edix Quickstep. Today's stage is their big German sprinter, Marcel Kittel. Gold shoes of Peter Sagan, barely noteworthy given that they seem so appropriate. Season about the string of second place finishes for Peter Sagan, and he had so many at the Tour de France last year, which arguably made him even more popular than if he had have won all those stages. 3,535 kilometres between the peloton and Paris in the final yellow jersey. It's all about to get underway. The race director, Christian Prudhomme, is on the horn. The flag has been waved, about to get into the lead car as the race is underway. Lee Howard of the IM cycling team was the first to try and attack. Now the reaction has come fiercely, and it's the Cannondale Drapac team going off the front early in the race, with the reaction coming from Thomas Voeckler of Direct Energy. There are no surprises there. This is Lee Howard. He's debuting the Tour de France, and he manages to get himself off the front within the first few metres. A flick of the elbow. He's looking for some cooperation. And happy to try and close things down. And 3 teams to note towards the front. Katusha, the red colours with the K. The other red colours, Thomas de Gent wearing those for Lotto Soudal. And also the Dimension Data team, the teammates of Mark Cavendish. They're pretty happy with the composition of that breakaway, clearly, and they're hoping to see that small group go away, and then they can contain things for the rest of the race. In fact, it's not Thomas Voeckler that's trying to go across. It's a different team entirely. It is the Fortunato Vital concept team trying to come across to Alex Howes from the Cannondale Drapac squad. And the three riders at the front now assessing the situation, seeing that two more riders are about to come across. They'll be hearing on race radio, courtesy of their team cars, that the peloton is pretty happy with the composition of this group. So perhaps they'll be thinking about waiting for the other two to join them, make it a group of 5 to build up their lead even further. Well, the peloton pretty calm and fairly content with the composition of this group that is drifting off the front. I must confess, I was expecting a fiercer battle to try and get into the breakaway. And they're already out to a 36-second lead. It won't take too much longer before that really does start to build up. You can see the conversation at the front as they check across the shoulder to make the decision on whether to wait or, as if Jan Bader is the one who is calling the shots for the Bora Argon team. Paul Voss it is who is with him, and Lee Howard, the man who started it all. So on his debut in the Tour de France, he gets the distinction of being the first rider to attack in the 2016 edition of the race. Built his reputation early in his career really as a sprinter, Lee Howard. And he burst onto the scene in 2010 when he managed to win a stage at the Tour of Oman ahead of the likes of Tom Bonen and Fabian Cancellara. It was a big win for Lee Howard and huge things were expected of him. And it feels as if it's taking a while for him to really get going and fulfill that hope, that potential that many believed he held. It's easy to forget that he's still just 26 years of age, so he's got plenty of time. All calm in the peloton. One of the great features of the Tour de France is the amount of camper vans that we see following the race. And many of them you see more than once. Mont Saint-Michel are off in the distance. We'll get a chance to see that a few more times throughout today's stage before we make it to the finish at Utah Beach, as there are plenty of opportunities on a clear day to look back and see it from various points throughout Normandy. Not too many high up. Time for a drink for Mark Renshaw from Dimension Data, hoping to get Mark Cavendish back to the top of the podium as a stage winner. Marcel Kittel in the blue colours of Edix Quickstep, the big favourite for today's stage. Twice before, when the race has started with a road stage as opposed to a prologue, it's Kittel who's managed to win the stage, collect the yellow jersey, and he said he's tried to put it out of his mind the fact that the yellow jersey is up for grabs once again, but he would dearly like that yellow jersey. 2 minutes and 30 seconds, already the advantage for the two riders from Bora Argon 18, Jan Bader and Paul Voss, along with the Australian Lee Howard of IM Cycling. He's more than justified his late call-up to the team. It was only through injury and illness of one of his teammates who was in sparkling form that Lee Howard got his chance. He got the call on Wednesday. I'm sure it's one of the best phone calls he's received throughout his career. Luis Angel Mate is the rider from the Cofidis team in the centre of the picture. They've had a disappointing non-starter, Nasser Bouhanni. An incident that beggars the belief. On the eve of the French National Championships, he got himself in a fight with somebody that was in the naming room in his apartment, ended up with 4 stitches in his hand. That wasn't treated properly at the time, and now he finds himself unable to start the tour. And he has been the big investment for the Cofidis team across the past 2 seasons. And he had a number of crashes leading up to last year's Tour de France, which resulted in him not being able to deliver on expectations. Here come the 2 chasers. They should be able to make it across. Alex Howes is the rider from the Cannondale Drapac team. Already been a fall in the peloton, the first fall, and it is the debutant. No, it's not. I thought it was Fabio Aru momentarily, but it wasn't. It was his lookalike, Diego Rosa, who went down from the Astana squad. And Diego Rosa, one of the other 33 riders riding the Tour for the first time. This is Julien Vermont at the front for the edX Quick-Step team, followed by Thomas de Gent. The teams of the sprinters early, asserting their authority and just trying to contain that breakaway group of 5. And a touch of wheels. It was Diego Rosa who touched the wheel of the rider in front of him, who was from Dimension Data, and went down. Thankfully, wasn't going too quickly at that point. I say that from the comfort of the commentary tribune. And here comes the chase, trying to... Anthony De La Place from Fortuneo Vital Concept, who is one of the locals. The finish line tomorrow is just 10 kilometres from his house. He's riding the Tour de France now for the 5th time. When he made his debut in 2011, he had the distinction of being the youngest rider in the race. Obviously, that's no longer the case, but at 26, he's already got plenty of experience in the Tour. He's the same age as Lee Howard, Howard riding for the 1st time, De La Place for the 5th time. Good to see the Cannondale Drapac colours off the front. New sponsor, Michael Drapac, the man behind Drapac Capital, is at the race watching the Tour de France with effectively his team in the race for the first time. No surprises to see the teams who are at the front controlling affairs. edX Quick-Step along with Lotto Soudal, teams that have a great rivalry, but also they've got a lot of alliances in the earlier part of the stage, but those alliances are broken once they get to the back end of the stage and the battle really heats up to try and win. I can't help but wonder what sort of an impact that early crash for Diego Rosa will have put through the peloton. Just a reminder, as if they needed any, of all the risks that are involved in such a race. The Normans, then the domain of the Bretons, and the Vikings raided through here and controlled the area from 907 through to 937. And the church that you saw in the centre of town, the Notre Dame des Champs, it's a Gothic revival style. It was actually a reconstruction of the original church and was rebuilt back in the 19th century. Lee Howard making the most of the descent. He's got good bike handling skills, Lee Howard. He's been a multiple world champion on the track, including in the Madison, which is basically the relay race of cycling. 2 of you, one in the race at a time, hand slings to put the other one into the race, and it is not for the faint-hearted. And Lee Howard's been the world champion in that discipline.
No, you've really got to have eyes in the back of your head and all round your head as well in the Madison. You've really got to have your wits about you in that track event. And guys who are good at that are also generally really good tactically on the road, and they're very aware of what's going on around them. So Lee Howard, not such a problem today. He knows what's going on around him. There's only 2 other guys been with him all stage, so won't be spending a lot of time in the bunch in his very first Tour de France, at least on stage 1.
On stage 1 only. This is Daniel Tekle-Hammernots, the Eritrean national champion, just adjusting the hair underneath the helmet. And he's a man last year who created some history in African cycling, becoming the first Eritrean to start and finish the race. He was one of 2. Mahawi Kudos was also with him. In fact, there's 2 Eritreans again in the race this year. Natnel Bahan is also starting the race. But last year, Tekle-Hammernots, he had the King in the Mountains jersey, and he became the biggest sporting hero in Eritrea. It was a beautiful moment. He's a guy that you know reasonably well because he spent a couple of seasons with the Orica Bike Exchange team.
Yeah, that's right. When we were both with, at the time, the Green Edge team when it first started, even before Orica was announced, I was Daniel Tekle-Hammernots' first roommate. So when we were on the team camp at the end of the 2011 season, we were in Melbourne. I roomed with Dan, and one thing that people will have become aware of as they got to know Daniel Tekle-Hammernots is he's always smiling. He has got the broadest grin in the bunch, and whenever you see him, he's just so happy to be a part of professional cycling. And I saw him, I bumped into him at the press centre, in Saint-Lô the other day, and again that big grin, just so happy to be at the Tour de France after such a fantastic experience last year where he wore the King of the Mountains jersey for a few days.
And he feels a real sense of responsibility representing his people, so to speak, as he puts it, and he does it so well. He certainly did last year's Tour de France, and that smile, it's nearly as infectious as the smile of Esteban Chavez, the Colombian from the Orica Bike Exchange team. Paul Voss in the time trial position.
Well,
he's not waiting.
Maybe he has now decided to go on. He sort of wasn't really getting into it over the top of that climb in Avranches as we look down on the peloton making their way up the climb. Now at 4 minutes and 43 behind our leader. But Voss, he's probably had communication with the team director who said, listen, push on, make sure you get it, because if you don't take the next one and Lee Howard does and he beats you at the finish, it's all been for nothing. So push on, try and get on through to that next climb, which is also category 4, of course, the Côte de Falaise de Champeux. It's not shampoo, it's Champeux. And it's, I actually just drove over it after we finished our ride. We finished our ride just before that point and went over on the motorbike, and plenty of people up there too. The crowds are really out in force. You can see on the screen. Also in Avranches, the French people, and particularly those of La Manche region, are so happy to see the Tour de France start in their region, and they really are out in force.
There's also plenty of American tourists that are here at the race that I've had the chance to see over the last few days, doing the tour of all the beaches from the D-Day landings. And we'll get a chance later in the stage to go through some of that extraordinary history from back in 1944. And a couple of days ago, I had the opportunity to just take a walk along Utah Beach. And it's hard to comprehend. And they've got a memorial there where there's also a museum at Utah Beach, just 100 metres from where the finish line is today. And there's a U-boat with a statue of 3 soldiers charging out of the U-boat. And by that point in 1944, all the allure of the World War I, early part of the recruitment and the adventure of going to the other side of the world, that was well and truly blown out of the water, literally. And the reality of war was clearly there in 1944. And the thought of, we're going to be in these boats, we're heading to the beach, the Germans are already there, and you're going to jump out and charge towards the shores. It's a frightening thought. It really is. And this is a memorial to General Patton, George Smith Patton, who was one of the leaders throughout World War II. He also served in World War I, but he is best known for his leadership of the US Army throughout the Allied invasion of Normandy in June of 1944. Before that, actually, General Patton went to the Olympic Games in 1912 as a modern pentathlete, and he was a great sword fighter, and he used to teach a lot of sword fighting within the army before going on to World War I and then World War II. But he was also famous for his philosophy on inspiring the troops with vulgar-ridden speeches and leading with an offensive attack. And he is well remembered by the French, who were delighted that he made his presence felt here in France back in June of 1944. He also led the charge throughout the Mediterranean and the invasion of Casablanca, likewise the Allied invasion into Sicily. So he's a man with an extraordinary military record.
Just before the top of the climb, so I was looking out to see some of the people that I rode with in there, some of them on the right-hand side, having a look at the riders come past. So thanks to the guys from UPS for a great ride today. But I think they'll be marvelling at the speed that these guys are able to ride up that hill, because a lot of those guys I was with this morning were suffering.
Voss out of the saddle. He's in a big gear. He's using the big chainring at the front. He's muscling his way to the top. He'll be going anaerobic at this point. He knows how much power he can produce and for how long he can sustain it. And there's nothing that he can do about the chase from behind. At this point, he's riding to the numbers, flirting with his threshold, hoping it's enough to collect one more point in the King of the Mountains jersey.
I don't think he's riding to any numbers anymore. I think he's riding to the pain level that he can tolerate, right up until the point where he's about to blow up, but just not quite. Look, mouth open, out of the saddle, back and falling back into the seat again, squeezing every little bit out for that one solitary point, because he knows that is his ticket to the podium when he gets here to Utah Beach at the end of the day. No matter what happens in the crosswinds, no matter if he gets dropped, he'll be on the podium and he'll be in polka dots.
And you can see all those shirts on the side of the road. The publicity caravan has come through 2 hours in advance. Carrefour is the sponsor of the King of the Mountains classification. They've thrown the T-shirts out to the spectators. and they're cheering on Paul Voss to get to the top, collect another points, and move to the lead of the King of the Mountains classification. Voss is almost there. We'd love to take a look across the shoulder and see what is happening with the chase. It was Alex Howes of Cannondale Drapac who was the one trying to close it down.
He's weaving from left to right as he goes up. He's changing gears constantly, in and out of the saddle, and there it is finally.
He's made it to the top. Paul Voss has survived. He collects another point, and it's almost like a stage victory. He sits up as if he has won the stage, and now we'll wait for the rest of his breakaway companions, but he's required at the podium presentation at the end of the day. Lee Howard again across the top in second position, but no prize today for Lee Howard.
Well, Lee Howard being more of a sprinter, he wouldn't be, I think, that familiar with how the mountains competition works, especially in the Tour de France, which he's also never ridden. He wouldn't have been aware that there's only 1 point for the winner and nothing for second, so it makes no difference coming across the line in second. And Paul Voss, I'm sure now, he'll be looking forward to just going back, sitting in the wheels, taking a little bit of a break before starting to contribute again to this breakaway and trying to build their gap back out. As we now see, it's fallen under 4 minutes to the peloton, 3 minutes 50 for our 5 leaders. Any second now they'll be back together with 148 kilometres to go. Frank Schleck seemed to have something stuck in the derailleur.
And he was just advised by Shane Archbold from the Bora Argon 18 team, another one of the Kiwis in the race, one of 3 New Zealanders in this year's race. Good to see him making his debut.
The man known as the Flying Mullet, due to his neck hair, as they call it in some parts of Europe.
He's got a haircut straight out of 1987.
He must have watched Dirty Dancing and become a fan of Patrick Swayze.
It's right up there with Patrick, isn't it? Frank Schleck, the man who finished in 3rd place in the Tour de France in 2011 when Cadel Evans went out the winner. It was his brother Andy in 2nd position. Andy, the younger of the Schleck brothers, has been retired now for a couple of years and owns and operates a bike shop in Luxembourg.
Andy himself a winner of the Tour de France.
Indeed, in 2010.
From 2nd place when Alberto Contador was stripped of the title. So the Schlecks with a great record in the Tour de France. Unfortunately, Andy succumbed to a knee injury that was recurring and he could not get it better and decided to call it a day and hang up the wheels, which was quite a surprise for such a young guy to not persevere longer and try and get things right. But, okay, I don't know the full extent of the injury, but did seem a bit strange to hang it up so quickly.
Can't help but wonder whether there'll be lingering regrets when he gets into his 40s and it's all too late. Paulo Tirolongo for the Astana team, controlling affairs for them and making sure that they protect their team leader, Fabio Aru, who's making his debut at the race after having won the Tour of Spain last year. Michael Matthews, he is one of the contenders for the stage tomorrow, and Michael Matthews, riding for the Orica Bike Exchange team, is well aware of the main challenges for today's stage. A fast finisher, perhaps not quite quick enough to contend with Kittel and Cavendish, but tomorrow he is certainly one of the favourites. For the increase in the tempo, and you can see how frantic it is, 10 kilometres to the intermediate sprint, but that seems insignificant. Tasato at the front, and there's been a fall.
Contador.
Alberto Contador. It is Alberto Contador with a lot of skin off on the right-hand side. That is disastrous for Contador. The whole season based around this race, and Contador, it might be over before it barely gets started. They won't be waiting for him. It was his teammate Tazzardo who was right on the front, and he'll have heard it.
And I think maybe Contador was taken out by another rider on the inside. It was one of the BMC riders there.
Marcus Burkhardt.
With the yellow shoes, Burkhardt. I'm not sure if there was a tangle of handlebars. They came around the corner. But tragedy has struck for Alberto Contador. Going down at this point in the Tour, at any point in the Tour, is bad. On day one like this, with crosswinds like there is today, let's just hope he's okay and can get himself back to the bunch and there's no real damage. But his jersey is completely torn apart.
Well, there's no urgency in the chase. His team riders, his teammates, they're waiting for him. They're trying to encourage Alberto to get going, but Alberto is showing no signs at this point of really opening up the throttle. He's currently just trying to do the assessment, bike change. That's the first of the assessments. Next is how is he physically?
And the question is now, what do his rivals do? Does the peloton now ease up? They will have heard what's happened behind. Or do they take advantage of the situation? We saw Alberto Contador take advantage once when Andy Schleck dropped his chain. Is this a similar situation? Will they keep going? And look at Alberto Contador here. Hopefully his jersey is the worst of his injuries, but definitely skin off. This is Geraint Thomas.
Well, he celebrated the 3-1 win for Wales last night, but he's not celebrating this afternoon. Looking for the team car for the bike change. Problems for Geraint here. Rear wheel puncher. Just a change of the rear wheel, and it's the neutral service from Mavic. Unfortunately, Geraint Thomas has got no ambitions of his own, and the good news for the Welshman is that Froome has avoided the trouble.
So Alberto Contador, following his bodyguard Matteo Tossato around that bend, was just a few positions behind him, didn't quite make it into the wheel to get around that bend, and maybe took a bit of a risk to try and get around the corner and back into the wheel of Tossato, but then came undone. And unfortunately for him, as he went down, there was a traffic island right in the middle of the road, and his right shoulder took the brunt of that fall as he crashed into the traffic island. His team now dropped back. Team time trial mode now to try and bring Alberto Contador back to the peloton.
And they're now being caught by the group with Danny Navarro is the rider in the red colours from Cofidis. He was not involved in the fall. He missed the split. This is Matteo Tossato now who's dropping back. If Alberto had been following the bodyguard, he would have been safe.
And it doesn't. Peloton, look at that long line on the right of screen, all trying to get themselves up to that arrowhead. You look at them spread across the road at the front, but at the back, it's panic stations trying to get back. And is the pace going out at the front? It looks like it is. A lot of discussion now going on at the front between Lotto, Katusha, Movistar, Ethics Quickstep. So the pace really come off. So it looks to be, fortunately for Alberto Contador, the peloton is sitting up and will allow them to come back fairly easily, but it'll all depend on what the damage is to the Spanish former Tour champion.
Well, it's been 7 years since Alberto Contador has won a stage at the Tour de France. That was back in 2009, the second time he won the race overall. Yet, understandably so, we always talk about him as a contender to win the race. If he gets back to this group, which judging by the composition of the peloton, the way it's starting to fan out, I think he will get back to this group. Frank Schleck, I should say, is the rider that has gone towards the front to slow things down.
Well, who I saw there was Fabian Cancellara, one of, you would say, the patron of the peloton, one of the elder statesmen now of the peloton. His final year, but he's always been a rider to observe the etiquette, the unspoken and unwritten rules. And he would have got himself to the front and said, hey, this is a moment when we wait. You don't do that to each other. And I think he's right too. 75 kilometres to go. I don't think it's the right thing to keep going on with it and to Contador's disadvantage. Other people may disagree, but that's my point of view, and I'd say it's Fabian Cancellara's as well.
So if Alberto Contador makes it back and he has no broken bones and it's just skin off, that crash has still cost him a chance of winning the Tour de France, because his body is not just recovering from the physical effort, it's trying to mend all that. Lost the Tour de France in 2008. It was not up Alpe d'Huez when Carlos Sastre won. It wasn't on the time trial before they hit Paris. It was the crash that he had on about stage 9 and all the skin he lost. He just fatigued a little bit more than Carlos, who had no problems throughout the race, as Cadel was trying to recuperate from the strain of racing and from the crash. And Alberto is going to find himself in exactly that position this year.
It certainly makes it very, very difficult indeed. It's one thing to recover from the race, but to be recovering from injuries. And, well, I hope for Alberto it is just skin and not something more structural.
The good sign is he's out of the saddle. So he's got some weight on the shoulder, he's got some weight on the collarbone, and the wrist is carrying the weight as well. So in terms of bones, it looks okay. In terms of grimace, that's enormous.
But he'll be quite relieved to be already in amongst the cars. He's got a lot of his teammates there, and he will see the peloton up in front of him. And he will have been told the peloton's sitting up, so don't panic too much. come back and then get those wounds seen to straight away, because the last thing you need, you can ask Buani this, is a wound that's not treated properly that then gets infected as they now come through 5 kilometres to the sprint. The question now is, does the peloton and the sprinters teams want to ramp things back up, go for maximum points the intermediate sprint? They'll have to catch the breakaway, which is now slipping back out to 40 seconds, re-establishing a lead because the peloton has sat up.
Well, that's where I thought he was quite lucky in terms of being able to get back to the peloton, because there's lots of others in the race whose race doesn't concern Contador. Like, well, Peter Sagan, one of his teammates, who's going for the green jersey. We note that Sagan didn't go back to collect him, the world champion, because he's got his own ambitions. And others are there thinking about that green jersey as well. So that just naturally increases the tempo. But now that Alberto has returned, the truce will be over.
Be a good way to run the competition. Win a stage, you're active. You're on, you're in it for green.
So with your second places in the battle for green behind Eric Zabel, that would elevate you to how many green jerseys?
I'm not sure. I actually haven't thought about it.
I thought we were going with the old Paul Keating, the former Australian Prime Minister, statement of always back self-interest. At least you know it's trying.
No, I don't go for woulda, coulda, shouldas with myself and my own career. That's how it was then, but I'd like to see the rule come in, because I think it'll make it a lot more interesting, a lot more at stake.
Well, there's 1 kilometre to go before they collect the first points in the race for the green jersey, but you've won 3 times.
Now, Lee Howard, he missed out on the mountain points. He tried to keep Barter and Voss under control going to the first climb, but now he's in his territory. Will he be able to wrap up the points? On paper, he's by far the fastest of this group.
Lee Howard will win this intermediate sprint to collect the 20 points as a mark of honour. 500 metres to go. De La Place at the front, followed by Lee Howard. It's then Alex Howes and Jan Barter at the back of it. Jan Barter's going to take a flyer. He wants the points. And Lee Howard, is he going to respond? Yes, he is. Howard picks up the slipstream of the big check. It's Barter who is at the front. Lee Howard is closing down. Alex Howes has drifted off the wheel. So too is De La Place. Barter looking to collect all the intermediate prizes for Bora Argon 18. Howard checks across the shoulder. And now Howard goes, making his bid to collect the 20 points. Lee Howard, bienvenue on Le Tour de France. On debut, he collects 20 points in the race for green.
Nice job, Lee Howard. Well spotted. I thought for a moment he's going to get surprised here. He's not going to even be having a look. Right at that second, I was almost going to say it. Looked over his shoulder. As we look now at the peloton coming through, Marcel Kittel starts to signal his intentions. Andre Greipel takes him on. Greipel takes maximum points from the peloton just ahead of Marcel Kittel, who for me was not even out of third gear.
It was a sprint of who can use the least amount of energy to get the maximum points. It was a very conservative sprint without trying to give too much away or spending too much energy. And Contador is now in the hands of the race doctor. Looks like Leo Sayer. It's not going to be a comfortable night's sleep for Alberto.
No, he'll certainly be sleeping on the left side tonight, Alberto Contador. He gets his shoulder patched up. And, well, the medical team from the Tour de France, they're very accustomed to fixing injuries and dealing with incidents like this on the go. And they not only will have given it a bit of a clean out and disinfected at the moment, but as soon as Alberto's off the bike, they'll be doing that again. Probably his own team doctor will be the one doing it, making sure that every bit of grit and dirt is out of that wound and out of any others. You can't afford, when you crash in a race, to not treat any tiny little mark. And I'm speaking from experience, because I once had a crash in Belgium where we did all the major wounds, shoulder, hip, knee, buttocks, the whole lot. It was excruciating. And there was one on my ankle. And they said, and that one there, I said, it's okay, it's already dried up, it's fine. That's where I got an infection. It ended up ruling me out of the Giro d'Italia, which was 2 weeks later, because I got so sick. So you've got to really go over the whole body. It's like when you go and hire a car, you've got to walk around and check the damage. If you see something, take care of it, say it. Same as an injury. If you see it, take care of it, because it'll be the one that comes back and bites you.
Otherwise, you pay later. Good analogy. I like it. Matteo Tessato, I should say, and Meche Bodnar, the two riders waiting with Alberto Contador, who was getting heavily strapped up. Well, that didn't quite work. Let's have another go at it. De La Place ploughs away at the front, raising the stakes as a local hero. The Aussie flag for the Aussie that won the intermediate sprint, Lee Howard. Alex Howes is next in line in the green colours of the Cannondale Drapac squad. And then it is Jan Barter in the black colours of Bora Argon 18. So with 49.3 kilometres to go, let's now head across to Paul Sherwin and Phil Liggett to take you through to the finish.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt, and also to Robbie there. Have brought us now to 49 kilometres to go from the finish. As we're watching a peloton now, a little bit bemused by the fact that Contador's already had one nasty fall in this race when it was barely 3 hours old. He's all bandaged up and he's still in the race, of course, and they're saying it's just multiple abrasions. Same with Brent Buchwald, who fell with him. But Paul, this breakaway now is going to have to concentrate on the 58-second gap to the two front runners.
Yes, but 58 seconds, Phil, at speeds like this, this is around about a kilometre. I think the main field have pretty much got that breakaway group pegged. They have been in the breakaway since kilometre zero, so they're going to be reasonably easy to pull it down towards the end, because although we're looking at 50 kilometres to go to the finish, that last 50 kilometres, we'll see the main field touching speeds in excess of 55 kilometres an hour, I think, just because of the fact that we're going to pick up an advantage from the tailwind, and then down towards the end a little bit of a nasty crosswind too. Close to the dangers of the day, they now realise it's going to get just a little bit more hairy as they start to move inland into the headwind, head down towards Sainte-Mère-Église, and then they will line up. And that's the interesting thing about today's stage. Once they start to turn left and head down towards headwind, head for the finishing line in Utah Beach, that's when they will pick up this roaring tailwind, and we'll see incredible speeds today.
Cars getting themselves back in line.
That's Van Garderen.
Yep, change of colours, but it's TJ Van Garderen. He's been back.
Well, I'm just looking at the bike there, and he doesn't have a number on his bike. And interestingly enough, TJ Van Garderen, a little story about him as well as he gets back on there with the help of... Oh, crash at the back.
Arashiro from the Lamprey team on the floor here.
Well, you see, it's all nervous now, Phil. These are the moments. Look at that crash. And in fact, the accident happened because they were all slowing down to queue up to get around that right-hand corner.
And he's 6th Tour de France, Arashiro, Japanese rider. He was the first Japanese rider to take part in the Tour back in 2009. And he's always arrived in Paris. That's a very credible performance by him.
Well, he should be lucky enough to get back on here quickly, because the man who was at the front of him there in the black and red jersey, that's TJ Van Garderen, shares the leadership of Team BMC with his Australian teammate. And although, in fact, rather interesting, because Richie Porte on that squad has been given the #1 slot, 91 for Richie Porte, 99 for TJ Van Garderen. But when we spoke to both of them before the start of this race, they said, look, we're both going in as joint leaders for this team. And I think it'll actually be better for TJ Van Garderen, because it'll take a little bit of pressure off him being the sole leader of the squad. And as long as both Richie Porte and TJ Van Garderen don't have the proverbial bad day, they will both be up in the top 10 and vying and struggling to try and get themselves a podium finish in Paris. Richie Porte, I have to say, so far this year has had a great season with a fantastic performance in the Criterium de Dauphiné, even though he lost out a little bit on the final day of the race.
The kilometres are ticking off. We're exactly 10 miles, 16 kilometres from the finish. These guys know there is still a chance when there's daylight between your back wheel and the peloton. There's the 10 or 15k to go.
Well, 15 kilometres now inside of 10 miles. You know, Alex House there, he was trying to catch the referee in the red car unawares, because I think the referee's driver was going to sleep a little bit, and Alex House said, well, look, if I can just use that to get a little bit of slipstream to pull myself away, there's always this chance. He will not give up until the main field are right on his wheel. But, you know, the main field, the professionals like this field, they do not make mistakes, and they know how important today's stage is. They know how much of a chance they've got as a sprinter. Andre Greipel, Marcel Kittel, Mark Cavendish get across the line in first place. It's not only today, it's not a stage victory today, it's a stage victory plus a yellow jersey.
The peloton are under that same 15-kilometre banner. They're holding it 30 seconds. We're bound now for the town of Saint-Mère-Église here.
Wales last night, but he's not celebrating this afternoon. Looking for the team car for the bike change. Problems for Geraint here. Rear wheel puncher. Just a change of the rear wheel, and it's the neutral service from Mavic. Unfortunately, Geraint Thomas has got no ambitions of his own, and the good news for the Welshman is that Froome has avoided the trouble.
So Alberto Contador, following his bodyguard Matteo Tossato around that bend, was just a few positions behind him, didn't quite make it into the wheel to get around that bend, and maybe took a bit of a risk to try and get around the corner and back into the wheel of Tossato, and then